Well, we'll have to. Sorry. Okay. So I turned on the transcription. All right. Okay. So let me get back to where I was here. I want to turn this off so I don't see this. All right. So so if we can think spiritually better, we can we can help to protect ourselves physically and help to protect ourselves intellectually because of our spirituality, because we recognize what is going on in our lives. So let me point this out to you in a more of a diagram. So if we look at this as a holistic system, if we see our lives as these three bodies, if we see this holistic system, holistic means that it's all together, everything is together. So here's our physical body, our form body. Here is our speech, our intellectual. And here is our mind, our spiritual. So if we're just thinking in body physical, we just have this space right here, this blue space, and these colors are completely arbitrary right now, just for the purpose of discussion. So in this space here, the body and the speech are interconnected with each other and are influencing each other. Here, the spiritual and the mind is interconnected with the speech and how we can how we are interconnected with those two things. Then here with the physical body and the spiritual body, we're interconnected here with this green space. So the yellow space is the speech and the mind, and this is the body and the mind. In the center is this red space, and this red space is where all three things are interconnected. And this is where we want to be. This is being a complete human being, not being a partial human being, not one who is just physical and intellectual, or being spiritual and intellectual, or being physical and spiritual, but being all together, all of this as one human being. So this is what we talk about as, and this is what being a spiritual Buddha, Bodhisattva, being on the path. So it doesn't have to be the Buddhist path. The Buddhist path articulates it very well. The intellectualism of it understands or articulates the spirituality very, very, very well. And personally, that's why I follow that, because it helps me give words and concepts to things that are very, very subtle that are within myself. And this is what we're trying to share. The other systems do the same thing. Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, Jainism, uh, 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 Islam. They all have their ways of being able to explain these things. But in Buddhism, I've found that there's a great library, there's great many books, there's great many teachers that articulate this in a way that I can understand. And having studied this in other traditions and so on, some of these teachings are only available to the higher beings of those particular groups. You have to go through many years of training to be able to get to where you can receive those teachings. They're there, but you have to qualify for those. In Buddhism, it's much more accessible. It's much more open. And so that's a blessing to us. That's a great thing that we have to take advantage of. And so we take advantage of it in a positive way. And the compassion of the teachers is there being shared with us. So an example of that is what just happened over this past weekend at Dharma Surya when Kenshin Rinpoche was there. And he spent so many hours, 2, 4, 8, 12 hours, with his compassion, trying to explain to us our human condition and how the human condition can be put into this system of being able to purify itself. So I'm trying to help in that way to support that, maybe in a more basic, simplistic way. So there are many great teachers, and my level is very small, but I want to share it with you because it may help. This is kind of how it helped me. And I think all the teachers would tell you that it's better to go on some kind of a path that is helping and that you perfect it as you go along. You find, oh, well, I didn't explain this quite right now, but in another year or so, I found better words to be able to help explain this. Or maybe it became clearer to myself, and I was then able to make it clearer to somebody else. So we're not going to get it perfect the first time, the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time. But it's the patience that we have for ourselves, the compassion that we have for ourselves, the diligence that we have for ourselves to work within a system, to be able to let all the different myriad different connections begin to work within us. We begin to recognize those things. So going back to my illustration here, so that's this red zone. So sometimes we need this physical spiritual connection here. We really need to work on that. Sometimes we need to work on the spiritual, intellectual, mind-spiritual connection. Sometimes it's up here. But when we can do this all the time in this red zone, now we're getting closer and closer to our true nature. Our true nature is to be pure, to be as the Buddha, to be awakened. But we've allowed ourselves to get conditioned, to get confused. So we get confused by those poisons, those causes of those poisons, the hatred, the ignorance, etc., that we went through. They are the poisons that keep us from our true nature. If our true nature is this diamond, this true indestructible diamond nature here, but if it's all blocked up with the emotions, then we can't see that diamond nature. But as we work on this, those obstructions begin to loosen up, and the wisdom of our true nature begins to come through. And we see that we're making progress. So part of this is the study. Part of this is the teaching, the study of the teaching, the contemplation of it, and some of it is the actual practice of doing these things. And this is another benefit of the Buddhism, because it gives us a whole set of practices that we can do to be able to help purify ourselves, which is like taking this stone, and let's say the stone starts off as this opaque, filthy rock, but there's this diamond inside, and it teaches us how to chip away at it, and then what's revealed inside is this diamond. And then we're able to take the special cloth or whatever, and we're able to polish it. And this is what we do through our practices. It's a physical process. And our practices is a physical, intellectual, and spiritual practice that we do to polish our true nature, to make it sharp and clear, unimpeded, and recognizing our nature and so on, this intellectualization. Any questions about this? I'm sorry if it sounds a little bit abstract right now, but I'm trying to help make it clear. Yes?
Where does fear go? Where does fear fall into? Does fear fall into the animal realm, like fear, the emotion?
Fear is in all of it. The
In
God
the
realm,
six, okay,
the,
in the six realms.
fear is something that is woven in all of that. That the human God can feel fear. The demigod can feel fear. The human animal can feel fear. Every one of them feels fear, recognizes fear, and the fear comes out of, the inadequacy, the jealousy comes out of the greediness. It's all interwoven with each other. Does that make some sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
So this is part of the critical thinking, and I got to give credit to critical thinking to my good friend Dorji, because a number of years ago he is a teacher. He teaches at the at Nova. He teaches communications. He teaches like public speaking, and he invited me to come to give a talk to his students a couple different times. And he talked all the time about critical thinking. And that phrase was so important that I've integrated it into all the talks that I give, because that's really what we're doing. We're human beings, and we're beginning to think critically about who we are, why we are who we are, and how it is that we change. What, why, and how. So we're doing it with the addition of our spiritual education. We can do it intellectually with our physical body, but we don't have the benefit of the spirituality. When we bring in the spirituality into it, a whole other dimension becomes revealed to us.
Lance,
Yes, sir.
when you talk about critical thinking, do you think in Buddhism, when you have too much critical thinking, if you put critical thinking into use in Buddhism, do you think it will also lead to like a wrong view? Because when you're critical thinking, you are not taking things at its face value. You tend to analyze, you tend to examine, you tend to question, you tend to raise more questions and so on. But do you think that's in according to Buddhism, it might become like a wrong view, which is considered as not good in faith, like or for believers?
Absolutely. And, we can sometimes call that a spiritual pride. We start thinking, just in the spiritual realm all the time, we develop this pridefulness. But yeah, what we need to do is to develop the way in which we get to a point where we're able to rest all that investigation, to be able to rest the mind, and then to be able to transcend into this true nature that we have and so on. So yes, that's part of the process, is recognizing that that is possible, that we can overthink things. And part of our process is how to teach that.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, so what we're doing in this round of Buddhism 101 is we are talking about the academics, but also we're going to integrate this with the stages of meditation. So in the weeks to come, we're going to be applying that into our meditation process and show how we do that. And that's the benefit of the Buddhism, of this particular type of Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism is the wisdom path of how do we become the Buddha? How do we recognize ourselves as the Buddha?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. So now, if we've got these three bodies, this holistic system, body, speech, and mind, physical, intellectual, spiritual. So now we come to this diagram. Maybe some of you have seen this diagram. This is a diagram that I drew, or I didn't draw it literally, I pieced it together, but it tells a story. And it's a story that is very simple, but at the same time it's very abstract. And the more that we look at that, and the more that we apply it into our contemplations, the more the meditation becomes strong. So if you want to screenshot this, you can screenshot it, or I can send you this image or whatever. But I want to tell you what it means. We start at the bottom and work up. So here is the space. This black is this space, this undefined, unknowable, non-conceptual space that we are within, but we don't see it. It permeates everything, but it's invisible to us. And we're trying to understand it. We'd like to understand it, but it's just too abstract. It's beyond our ability as human beings. We are three-dimensional human beings, the body, speech, and mind. This is everything. That three dimensions are here, but there's so much more here too. And it's from this space that all this comes. This seminal point right here, this point right down here, can you see my little cursor hand here is pointing, and this is the point, this is the seminal point where this space all of a sudden becomes manifest. It's like all of a sudden this coalescence, all of a sudden this threshold is just becomes so powerful, it just like kind of pops open. So an illustration of this is what we talk about, the Big Bang Theory. And whether that's true or not, scientists are questioning that all the time and so on. But out of this space, out of this nothing, what seems to be nothingness, all of a sudden comes this burst, this seminal point of light, of energy, of matter, and so on like that manifests. So going back to the diagram, so this seminal point then manifests as this three-dimensional tetrahedron. This is called a tetrahedron. That from every dimension here, it's all equilateral triangle, and it's three-dimensional. So it's very much like the diamond that I was showing you. It's that kind of idea. And everything that we know is in that tetrahedron. This is phenomenal nature. This is phenomenal nature. This is the multiplicity of all the things that we know, all the things that we want to know, all the things that we are capable of knowing or seeing or feeling and so on is within that. It's what it is to be a human being. So I know that sounds crazy, but the universe is within all that. So this is symbolic. You got to remember that. It's symbolic. So it helps us to visualize this, that it's still all in the space. The space still permeates it. So if you go here, we see this blue here, but, it's all permeated by this space, this multiplicity of potential of all these different things. And then here is this dualistic infinity compassion curve. This is called the Mobius strip in mathematics. They call this the Mobius strip. And in this is an understanding, is a logic, is a method by which we begin to try and understand that multiplicity. It's a system of our brain, of our intelligence, and so on. These things don't recognize themselves. It's only human beings that recognize them. Animals don't recognize them as being all interconnected. I mean, they just see water and food and things like that. They may see doors and walls and so on, but they don't understand what they are. They just see them as obstacles, and they just, they deal with them the best way they can. But human beings, we contemplate these, we want to understand how we can make these better and so on like that. So that Mobius strip, that infinity, that compassion is what we are doing to try and understand, to try and capture, meaning in this, and to be able to take these things and transform them all for our benefit so that we can control this. It's very important for us to be able to control everything. We want to change everything. It's important to change, but to Dorji's point, we can go overboard with that. We never say, oh, enough. Now I'm just going to enjoy it. We always want more. So this infinity represents that. What we call infinity, when we look at the sky, we may say, oh, it's infinite as the universe, as infinite as the sky, as infinite as all this space and so on, as we view the space. But if we can't see it, if we can't weigh it, we negate that it actually exists. But the space is all around us. The space is much more profound than we give it, than we understand. This would be like the absolute nature. This would be the phenomenal nature. We talk about the two natures, or the two truths, the truth of the absolute, the truth of the relative. This is trying to understand it through our dualistic thought, through our logic. Then the body of wisdom is this sphere here, this body of wisdom that we begin to develop through our investigations, through our logical investigations of the intellect, but also is the spirituality in this. Also, we're recognizing within that infinity, within that dualism, there is this ability, or this body of knowledge, this technique, to be able to understand that there is this spirituality. And to bring this spirituality into the equation, which was the first slide, which was the part of being a complete human being. We can achieve a lot of this just through this intellectual, physical body portion right here. But when we introduce the spiritual, now we're opening up that there's another way of looking at things and how it affects our body and so on, and makes us much more of a subtle body, makes us much more what we call an illusory body, a light body. So this is part of this dualistic investigation that brings us to this wisdom. There is this wisdom of this body of knowledge of things, but in that is this body of things that is very, very experiential. You can't weigh it, you can't measure it. It is spiritual. And we begin to have experience with that. We begin to recognize that the experience, and it conditions what happens to our body. It conditions what happens to our intellectual investigations. And once we begin to really develop this and become stable in that, it never goes away. We can suppress it. We can kind of put it away because we're afraid of it. But if we bring it out and we use it, and we use the techniques that we learn through our Dharma teachings, then it becomes a vibrant part of our lives. And that wisdom, that sphere of wisdom now, becomes more than just the physical wisdom, the intellectual wisdom. It becomes a spiritual wisdom. The spiritual wisdom. So this is the prajna. We talk about the prajna, and we talk about it, when we talk about it in terms of Buddhism, we talk about it in terms of the prajna paramita, the perfection of wisdom. And we talked about this last week. We talked about the 5 paramitas, 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections, and the way in which that begins to manifest, and how everything takes on a whole new dynamic to it. And Khenchen Rinpoche was talking about this too over this weekend. He was talking about how this works, or at least he was pointing to it. He didn't go into it a lot of depth, but he mentioned it a number of times. So as we are developing this wisdom body, this understanding, this experience of bringing this all together, then so here's this wisdom. Then there is this energy where all this thought, all this materialism, all this stuff becomes like a vibration. And we use the vibration as a symbolic expression to be able to say something about something that can't be expressed. We say that there's like this vibration that goes through everything, and we're part of that vibration. Everything is part of that vibration. We can look at it in terms of quantum physics when they say, okay, we get down to atoms, and then atoms are made up of subatomic particles, and then those subatomic particles are made up of more subatomic particles, and then they are all in a space of energy. And if you break those bonds, those linkages between those subatomic particles and those atoms and so on, this energy is released. So we talk about, this is where we get nuclear energy from, where we get nuclear bombs and all this kind of stuff. And this is scary stuff because it's so powerful and it's so transformative. Who's to say that we're not mutations of some explosion, some nuclear experience that went crazy, and we're mutants of that? Can anybody say that's not true? Of course not. It may not be true, but it could be. It's an interesting proposition, isn't it? And there's books written about this. There's comic books written about this. There's stories written about this.
We're made of stardust.
We're made of stardust and so on. So there's been cataclysmic things that have happened already. This new spaceship, this new satellite is finding all kinds of things. Yes, Dorje. He's giving me thumbs up. Okay, thank you, Dorje. So this continuum is like a vibration. It's like a thread. It's very, 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 very subtle, but yet it goes through us all. It permeates everything. And it is what leads us to, it is our connection to that space. So going back, see this? It's like a flame. And the very tip of that flame, the whole thing, it fades and it fades and it fades until it just becomes space itself. And that's what the Dharmakaya is all about. That's what the Buddhism is all about. Talking about this, that we become space. And it's this continuum that we are part of. And until we're able to, how do you say, jump from that continuum, to fade into that continuum, away from that continuum, into that space. And that's the point of becoming a bodhisattva that becomes a Buddha. When you become the space. You see everything, you hear everything, because we're human beings, but yet we're not attached to any of it. We're not conditioned by it. We're transcendent of it. And it is our radiance of that freedom that is that vibration. It's like light. But the light, you just put your finger right through it. You can't hold it. So we're using all these as metaphors and so on because that's all we've got to communicate with. But when we experience this through our practices are not concrete, but they are devices to help us to be able to rest our investigation I go back to the screen share. So there is investigation here in this multiplicity, in this dualism, in this wisdom, is this investigation that we are constantly going through. And through that investigation, we begin to recognize that it's being a human being is a stepping stone, to get to the space. And that all this stuff, this multiplicity, is all us. We are it, it is us. It's what Carla just said. We're just cosmic dust. We're made up of the same stuff. It doesn't matter if we go out to the planet Uranus or Ceremus or wherever and find that, the scientists are they're able to say, oh, well, we're all made up of the same stuff and everything. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, From our point of view, it seems that way. So, but when we recognize that being a human being is just 3 dimensions, but that there's other dimensions. How do I know that there's other dimensions? I don't know. But I've experienced something that seemed, I could say that, but I can't tell you what they are. There's no words for it. But it falls into that category of being able to say, well, there's this spiritual dimension that is beyond the ability of the intelligence to be able to communicate. But yet I can tell you how I got there. It's repeatable for me. I can get there anytime I want if I feel like I'm not there, but I feel like I'm there. But it's the same process, though, that the Buddha has followed and other great masters have followed. Not just Buddhism, but Christian masters and Jewish masters and Hindu masters, etc. have gone through this process and have experienced this, and they might have different words for all these different experiences and methods that they use, but yet they came to the same essence, to the same place. Yes, Carla?
Would that space be emptiness too?
Emptiness is a way of explaining, I'm going to go to the screen share. Emptiness is a way of saying that all of this is empty of its own true nature. This is all appearances of the space. It's all appearances of the space. So what that means is, if you take energy and you slow it down, suddenly light pops up. And if you slow it down even more, sound pops up. And if you slow that energy down even more, then matter pops up. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the velocity of light squared. So we are just all part of that, and it is empty of its own nature. That's what emptiness means. It's not permanent. What's permanent? Space. And that space has the spiritual quality that we call the absolute truth. Which is a intellectual, conventional way of expressing something that can't be expressed any further than that. It is a conundrum to an ordinary human being. It doesn't make any sense. But what it does, it frees you. It gives you that which we are all looking for. Freedom. Freedom from the attachment of the multiplicity. Freedom of the attachment of all this wisdom. Freedom of the attachment of all this method. And the only word that we can use is love. It just becomes love. When we have this experience as a human being, and we only know it as a human being, and we only know it from others as human beings, right? And so what is the one thing that they all communicate is that it's love, that there is this love. And what is this love? It's like sugar that hasn't been tasted. You have to experience it. You have to taste it yourself. So how do we do that? We have to transcend our human condition. How do we do that? We do that through the organized one mindfulness of our body, speech, and mind to go into that red center of those three bodies and have a transcendent experience of that which is transcendent of being a human being, our true nature, to get into that energy, to get into that E equals MC squared, to get into that emptiness, what we call emptiness, where we're not attached, where we're not part of the multiplicity. We have blown the multiplicity away. We have left the multiplicity. It's empty. There's nothing to pay attention to. So, what happens? So the way in which we experience this in stages. We go through, learning this and studying this and then having experience with it through our practices. And then what we're developing is the mind, the holy enlightened mind. And the holy enlightened mind is bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. This is the bodhicitta. Where is the bodhicitta? Is the bodhicitta here? Is the bodhicitta in our physical body? Or is the bodhicitta in our heart? And it's the bodhicitta that we find that is being expressed through our body and through our intellectualism. It is the holy enlightened mind. It is pure spirituality. So what this helps us to do is to set the stage for the 12 links of interdependent origination, which then is the multiplicity. So that's where we're going to start next week. So now you have a field in which maybe to begin to, a context in which to be able to think about the 12 links. Any questions or comment? I know I've gone on here pretty good. What do you think about this? No comment, huh? Okay.
The emptiness, it still confuses me. The emptiness part is like, oh, I can't get it, but it's okay. More will be revealed.
Don't say it confuses you.
Uh-huh.
No, that's a negative way of expressing it. Just say,
Okay.
I haven't been able to comprehend this yet.
Okay, I haven't been able to comprehend it yet. Thank you.
Because
Teacher, I'm kind of in the same category too, like the emptiness and stuff. Like everything is, I don't know how to explain it myself as well too.
well, you can't do this in one session. You can't do it in two sessions. You can't do it in a year of sessions or a few years of sessions or maybe a few lifetimes. It's taken us lifetimes to get to where we are right now.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have to have compassion for ourselves for our inability to recognize these things right now. But know that we're on a path.
Yeah.
Lance, you were talking about monastics, Buddhist monastics earlier, and
Yeah.
sexual desires. And it got me thinking two things. One is a quote from Aldous Huxley. He said, "An intellectual is a person who has discovered something more interesting than sex." And I think this is it, what you were just talking about.
That's completely true.
Yeah.
That's completely true. Because when you get to this point, sex is the last thing on your mind.
Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Being a human being. As a matter of fact, you just think of it as an impediment.
Yeah.
Can you share that quote in the chat, Brendan?
What quote is that?
The Aldous Huxley quote. Yeah.
Yeah, regarding that.
I'll share that in the chat.
Lance, I just put a medicine on my ear, and I have to kind of stand like this for a while.
It's okay. I'll
Yeah.
meet you halfway.
But I just walked to this library,
Yes.
the Fairfax Library, and there's Spanish literature heritage, some showcase going on, and I happened to find one interesting book, and I was reading it. So it's related to the what we were talking. Like we are all practicing Buddhism more to become a person of morality, right? Moral principle. So we talk a lot about moral principle. I think that's everything boils down to that, how to live a virtuous life. But the author here with an example set out to say something that also piqued me. He said like morality too is a question of time. Morality is a question of time. So there is one character who appears to be denying, refusing any bad things, including illicit relationships. But then another person was saying, it is a question of time. You might be denying, you might be refusing it, but there will be a time where you will embrace it with wholeheartedness. And I was thinking, yeah, so it is like we say something, but in reality, when we come to practice it, can we be righteous at all time, or there are time where we'll just giving into it, like we have the what shall I say, succumb to those kind of urge or instinct. And I also recall what George Bernard Shaw, an English playwright, he said, character is what you are in darkness. So it says, like when we are in front of people, we are all faking. But when we are not in front of people, then that's, you are authentic. You are the original personality. That's when it is. So I don't know, just I throw it out for some, thoughts and discussion on that.
Well, to your first point, it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to learn these things. It's our responsibility to purify these things. It's our responsibility to stabilize these things. Nobody else can do it for us. We have to do it on our own. And all these things together, there's, and not to be contaminated. If we go through this period of purity and we're able to purify and we're very happy and stable and so on, are we, in a weak moment, can we allow contamination to come in? And that's something that we have to be responsible for as well. And we have to develop the protection in order to not have that take place, to not have that contamination take place. So as my friend that I always talk about, my spiritual friend who I've never met, but has written that we are all Buddhas, we're all enlightened, we all have it within our grasp, and once we get it, though, living an enlightened life is what's difficult. That's what's difficult. I just finished reading one of the sutras when Khenpo Tupsang was reading the sutras a couple of months ago at Dharma Surya, and one of them I was reading, and in there, the Buddha was teaching, and the sutras are, his teaching, and he called this planet the planet of endurance. That this is endurance. That no matter what we're doing, you see, we're enduring all the stresses of the multiplicity, all the confusion of the multiplicity. And we have to endure that. And we have to take responsibility for how we do that and what the result of that is, and so on. So that never ends. So, and this is samsara. That's what this is. Now, we can achieve a level of nirvana and maintain that, but how long can we endure that the rest of our lives? That's what we're trying to do. And maybe we've been there, we've been there many times in other lives, so to speak, and we have this life to work at. And what comes before us, we don't know yet, or what comes in front of us, we don't know yet. So, but being free, you see, the view is freedom. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to become that space. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to be that space? Do you want to be free? If you don't want to be free, you're in the wrong place, in this talking about these things, because that's what we talk about.
There's a 60s song about that, isn't there, Lance? People just want to be free, right?
Oh, there's so much of it when you realize that and you start hearing the music and yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and art, I mean, how much artwork is the artist trying to get out of his bondage and so on. There's so many examples of expressing that freedom. All right. Well, thank you all very much. 9 o'clock has come, and I hope this was helpful. And next week we'll start talking more specifically about the 5 skandhas, which are the composites, the components, the compounds, the heaps of being a human being, and then how that works into the 12 links of interdependent origination, which is the outer rings of the 6 human realms. So we're building up. We're starting off with small building blocks, and now we're getting to bigger visualizations. All right. Thank you. We need to do our dedication. So if you don't mind, I've got my book. Hope you all have your book. We'll go to the dedication prayer on page 21. So recite with me, please. Mute your microphone so we don't feed back on top of each other. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate word of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, May I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Take care, everybody.
And if you have questions, write them down, and I'll be glad to talk to you about them. So anything that seems confusing is just that which you haven't figured out yet.
Thank you.
It's a good thing to have those questions. Don't think of it as a negative thing.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you, Lance.
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Take care,
Great
everybody.
teaching.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good
Thank
night.
you. Okay. Roger, if you'd like to, did he go? He went. Okay. All right, very good. How did that work out, Tom?
That was great.
Yeah? These
Yeah.
illustrations?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Good.
Yeah,
I
okay.
didn't record the whole thing.
It's okay. It's okay.